Now, and today's live stream is about learning how to let go. As always, welcome your questions and comments, whether they're on topic or not. We always want to be a resource for you, so just message in on any of the streams that we have going today. If you haven't already been over to Sober Now's Facebook page, please take a moment, head over, give it a quick like. You'll get notified about future live streams and other content that we're creating. All right, let's jump into it. We're learning how to let go. It's something that we've always heard about, but it's not something that we necessarily know how to do because we need to be pragmatic about this. Too often, when we say that we let something go, what we really mean is that we've stopped thinking about it, we've ignored it, we've just moved on. And when we move on this way, what we're really doing is accumulating what people call baggage. Baggage is past pain and anger. It's unresolved conflicts. It's inner conflicts. And it gets heavier as we go. The times we're living in are heavy enough. So accumulating baggage is not what we're looking to do. What we're looking to do is lighten up. And to lighten up requires release. And we're people who too often hold everything in. We embrace stoicism. We were conditioned to as kids, and we learned how to smile and tell everybody that we're fine, even when we're falling apart. So, the three things that I want to focus on today: letting go of grief, letting go of anger, and letting go of stress. And I guess to get to the heart of the matter, in order to be able to release these, I think there's two really big key items. The first one is that we have to be able to say what it is, and the second is that we have to be able to share it with others. So saying what it is, in recovery we like euphemisms. So we say that we're stressed when what we really mean is that we're anxious, we're scared, we're overwhelmed. We say that we're angry when we're trying to not be vulnerable. I'm fond of saying that anger never travels alone. There's always at least one other emotion that's present. And so, sure, maybe there's times where we just need to vent, spew a little bit of hate and discontent, and it still helps to have someone who's willing to listen and understand that it's not them we're angry about. We just need to spew some of that pent-up aggression. But what's more important is that we be able to identify, here's what I'm struggling with, here's what I'm really feeling, and let's get down to what is it that you actually need. Identifying that need is what allows it to be met, and involving other people in that process, of course, is key to it. The real key to expressing grief is that we need to be able and willing to share pain with others. When we cry alone, when we are experiencing loss alone, what we're most often doing is suffering. We recycle pain, we get in touch with it, we feel it, we express it, but we do it alone, and it's very limiting. It doesn't really give us the opportunity to consciously choose to release that which we have expressed. I recently lost someone very near and dear to me, and giving myself time to grieve means connecting with other people. The folks who support me, folks who were also near and dear to the person that we lost, and being able to tell those stories, being able to describe the kind of loss that we feel, being able to just allow ourselves to express the pain of loss is so foreign to us. It's the exact opposite of what we're used to. It looks most often like the type of stoicism of I'm just going to be strong and be there for others, and that needs to go. That is entirely self-limiting. It is not conducive, and if we really want to support others, then my experience is the best way to do that is to share our own struggles, because that opens doors for them. It makes it easier and more comfortable for them to acknowledge their pain, their loss. Of course, unfortunately, being part of recovery oftentimes means losing people near and dear to us because of relapse and overdose. And it's something that we never really get used to, we never really become desensitized to. It's just all too familiar. And when we choose not to grieve, what we're really doing is stuffing pain. That becomes something that we get to carry around. And then sooner or later, eventually what happens is we experience another loss, and we have this overwhelming, this crushing amount of sadness, and we have this feeling that what we're experiencing is disproportionate to what's happening. What happens with grief, of course, is that any loss in the present connects us to losses from the past that we've not yet grieved. And that's why things sometimes feel so much heavier than we think they should be. So the key to letting go is expression and release comes in a lot of different forms, but we tend to think of it only in a handful. So I say to folks all the time, laughter is release, crying is release, sex can be release, and even something as basic and primal as screaming can be a form of release. One of my favorite websites to tell people about looks like you need Iceland.com. This is a pretty great site. It was developed by a therapist, and it allows the user to actually record themselves screaming, and that scream is released into the barren wastelands of Iceland. A very simple form of release, something that I think typically we'd be self-conscious about, but if you know that nobody's listening, if you know that this is just a guttural primal response, then maybe that affords you the opportunity to let go of some pressure. I think that's what we're most aware of, is the amount of pressure that we put on ourselves to maintain composure, to have a sense of self-control, but then we also have a sense of the pressure that the world puts on us in the form of stress, in the form of expectations, in terms of demands on our time, financial stress. All of these things we tend to be aware of, but the underlying needs, the accompanying emotions, these are things that it requires a lot of practice for us to be able to reliably identify what they are, experience them, express them, and release them. And the key to all of that is most often withholding any judgment that we have around it. Because the way that we judge ourselves is fundamentally unfair. We tend to try to think our way or talk our way out of what we feel. We tell ourselves that we shouldn't be angry, when the truth is we're simply uncomfortable experiencing and expressing anger. We tell ourselves that something doesn't hurt us because we don't want to acknowledge it. We don't want to be sad. We don't want to have to share that loss with others. And this is how so many of us slip into depression. We're carrying around so much past pain and so much anger, but we are absolutely at a loss as to why we should be depressed. It's amazing to me that the things that have been the hardest to let go of are things that I truly do not want. Pain, anger, disappointment, loss, all of these things are things that truly I don't want to hold on to. And I think for those of us in any form of recovery, disappointment is especially poignant because most of us feel like we've already had enough disappointment for 5 lifetimes. And so the injustice of being let down further, or realizing that the things that we hoped or dreamed or prayed for aren't coming to fruition. We get stuck. We become angry with ourselves. We become ashamed. We struggle with guilt. Oftentimes we find ourselves angry with our higher power, angry with God. And this creates just a convoluted mess where we're tying ourselves up in knots when what we really need to do is keep it simple, be mindful, pay attention to ourselves, identify what we're feeling, what the nature of the struggle is, withhold judgment, express it to people who support us, and then make a conscious choice to release what we've held thus far. My hope is that gradually release and letting go becomes something that is spiritual in nature. And that doesn't mean that you have to embrace a deity. It means that you come to rely on something more powerful than yourself to help you on your journey. Old school AA folks often would say to me, you know what happens when you turn it over and turn it over, but you don't let go? You end up upside down and inside out. So the idea of turning it over is trusting my higher power to take care of the things that I cannot. It's a form of surrender. And I'm fond of saying that in truth, when I surrender, the only thing I'm really giving up are things that I'm powerless over, and I'm giving up the fight that I have with myself for control. And instead, I'm trusting that something more powerful than myself is going to take care of the things that I can't. And I found it easier to reconcile it when I realized that whether I let it go or not, I'm still powerless over it, which means I don't have any control anyway. And rather than agonizing over it, rather than fighting a losing battle over it, I can simply acknowledge, here's what I can do, here's what I can't, here's what I'm feeling, wanting, and needing, and then I can accept the responsibility of sharing those with others. We treat letting go too often as though it's a one-time experience, and that is almost never possible in my experience. We keep letting it go a little bit at a time until we feel free of it, until it no longer hurts us. And unfortunately, that's relatively rare among us. We have a tendency to do just enough work to be okay, and then we stop. And okay is the point where we're not overwhelmed, it's not debilitating us, and so we tell ourselves to just move forward. And of course, this is self-limiting. It means that we're carrying a certain amount of pain and anger still. It means that we have not taken every opportunity to connect with those who support us and allow them the joy of being of service to us. Many of us find that we let go of certain problems, stressors, situations only to take them back later. That's common. We need to be mindful of this. We need to be noticing when we're trying to control people, places, and things, and surrender anew. I found that too often I have chosen to suffer instead of grieve. I have chosen to carry something as opposed to letting it go, and I have felt the weight and the pressure of that for many years. And all of us want a greater sense of freedom. All of us want to not to have to carry these burdens, but the process of letting go involves hurting. It involves feeling and expressing anger. It involves facing fear. And in the short run, we always find it easier to not do that work. Only in the long run do we see the long-term effects, and we despair at the totality of how much work there is to be done. It feels like it's too much. It feels like it's going to overwhelm us, and the most common fear around that is that we're going to fall apart and never be okay again. Now, I think it's important to notice that that never actually happens. The worst case scenario is you cry yourself to sleep, you get up in the morning, you feel a little bit hungover, but it's because you're dehydrated and your body found it exhausting to sob or to deal with that tension. So I've come to a small list of truths that have served me really well. I'm going to share those with you. Again, if you have questions or thoughts on this topic, I'd love to hear from you. If you're watching the video long after we're done today, we'd still love to hear your comments, your questions. Give us a chance to connect around that. So very simple. I'm always preaching simplicity. What I have found is the more I use the Keep It Simple system, the more I have an awareness of what I need, want, and feel, and the more I can easily decide who to involve in this so that I can get those needs met. So in the simplest possible terms, there is no way to let go of an emotional experience without feeling it, expressing it, and consciously choosing to release it. I found that whatever I choose not to speak, not to share, will continue to undermine me, will continue to weigh me down. I've learned that saying things out loud and writing them down makes them more real. Too often, especially for those of us who have survived trauma, we're trying to maintain a level of detachment. We're trying to not feel something and not let it be really, really real. I've learned that the depth of the wound and the degree to which I share my pain with good people determines the readiness with which I release, and specifically that it's not a matter of my willpower. It is a matter instead of my willingness. I've learned that avoiding my pain, my anger, and fears will always result in them growing and will have many unintended consequences in my life. I think on some level, all of us want to believe that if I ignore something long enough, it will go away. I have found that to be true of only two things, teeth and good people. I've learned that letting go requires that I be mindful, that I not judge my feelings, that I experience and express them to good people, and that I consciously choose not to carry anything that harms me or limits me. I've learned that powerlessness is easily one of the most difficult lessons that a person can wrestle with, but I have found it 100% of the time to be liberating, to be freeing when I get to the other side of it. And I've learned that I can hate something and still accept it. That's an important reminder. I think too often we get stuck in how things feel or how unjust they are. Acceptance is an emotional process. I don't have to like something to accept it. I simply need to begin by acknowledging that I'm powerless to change it. And the more that I can be in a mindset of it is what it is, that's not a statement of resignation. It's a statement of I acknowledge the reality of what's happening. I can see what is in my control and what isn't. I can acknowledge how I feel about this, and I have a responsibility to express it. So, just a quick check of the streams. Again, would love to hear your comments and questions. Hello, my new friend from Tanzania, Africa. Wonderful to have you with us. It's delightful to me to connect with folks all over the world. Of course, so many of us are in and seeking various forms of recovery, and addiction, substance use disorder certainly does not discriminate. It affects all of us, and it's something that I think we're more aware of than we've ever been. But ideally, we are also working to make recovery something that we're more aware of than ever. So often, the things that confront us and challenge us are the intersection of addiction and trauma. And so even for folks who have experienced long-term sobriety or whatever your path to recovery is, we find that there's still always so much more work to be done. There's usually some mental health pieces that need to be addressed. There are some past traumas that have yet to be explored. And there are always needs that have not yet been met. And some of those may be from our past, some may be present. But it takes a lot of willingness to connect and share our struggles. So, going to be winding down for today. As always, I invite you to connect with me. Many ways we can do that. Jim@sobernow.com is a quick way to drop me an email. Let me know how things are going in your recovery, what it is that you're seeking, and let me know if there are topics that you'd like to see covered in future live streams. Would love for you to check out Sober Now's channel on YouTube. Tons and tons of live streams and content that we created around many different aspects of recovery, all of it completely free. Check that out. Give it a quick like and subscribe, and you'll get notifications about future live streams and other content. And of course, would love to have you check out our site. SoberNow.com is a subscription service now that is eminently affordable. Under $15 a month gets you access to both of our home study programs. One for those seeking to fortify their recovery from substance use disorder, and a separate program for people like me who are affected others, those of us who have loved ones in active addiction or early recovery. Let's identify a lot of the stressful aspects of going through that, and let's make sure that you're not going through those things alone. So please take excellent care of yourselves and each other. Please connect with us if we can be helpful to you in any way, and I will look forward to talking to you again